Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're sitting down because this is one that I think has been welling up within me for quite a while. This is not from any submitted question from viewers or anything. This is just one that is something that I feel is my duty to give to you all. My last Kerblog before this one was about how Bleach just ended on Adult Swim recently, and talked about my memories and experiences with that series. And so as some of you may or may not know, today, on the day that this video will be going up, tonight on Saturday, November 8th, Dragon Ball Z Kai, I guess more particularly in America as it's called, will be taking the place of Bleach on Adult Swim's Toonami block. This is very important because this is a show that needs to be watched by you. So I'm gonna wager a good guess based on the level of viewership that I get on the Kerblogs that I do about anime as of late, getting significantly more views than other stuff that I talk about. That if you follow my stuff, you probably like Dragon Ball Z. I know that there's also probably a good portion of people that didn't watch it, but I digress. I've seen a large number of people who have not given this show a chance, and some people who just didn't really get into Dragon Ball when they were a youngin. Wasn't one of their gateway shows into Japanese animation, as it were. So Dragon Ball Kai is something that I feel is really important because Dragon Ball is the second biggest anime property in the world, second only to Pokemon, and for very good reason. I feel like it's a series that people don't nearly give enough credit because people who don't really have a firm understanding of it and why it is that it is so wildly successful. I feel like with Pokemon, it's much easier to just kind of take it at face value. Even if you don't get it, you can see why it's so massive because of the entire franchise as a whole. Between everything. Dragon Ball, on the other hand, is something that started as a comic. Became really successful as that comic, got a really successful animated series, and then everything else followed from that, So, and it's something that has been over for a really long time, for well over a decade at this point. So clearly there has to be something to it, that is lost on people, including people who are anime fans, and they think oh, this is schlock, this isn't this isn't real storytelling or whatever. This is just stupid, mindless entertainment for 10-year-olds or whatever. And I'm sure even the hardcore fans could argue it is. It was for all the people back in the day that probably watched it fan subbed and were like, oh, it's violent, has cursing and blood and whatever. It's a kid's show. It's a kid's product as a comic, as a show, as everything. It's for kids. Period. But that certainly does not prevent it from nullify its success with people beyond its target age range. But I'm getting too much into semantics. Okay, what is Dragon Ball Kai? Dragon Ball Kai, for those of you who have not seen it and don't have a full understanding of what it is, I like to summarize it to people as it's Dragon Ball Z Director's Cut. That's not technically what it is. It's not defined necessarily the same way that would be used for a movie or something. But essentially, it is the footage of Dragon Ball Z, mastered as best as Japan could possibly get it, as far as I know, cut to the pacing of the manga series. I'll put it this way. So the original Dragon Ball Z series, which was a total of almost 300 episodes and across several years. Everything from the beginning of Z, which is where Raditz shows up. I'm also going to assume a bunch of people maybe know who these characters are just through seeing them everywhere, or maybe you watch the abridged series, who the hell knows. Anyway, everything from Raditz landing on Earth, Goku, you're an alien, to Frieza being defeated was 120 episodes in the original series. 120. In Dragon Ball Z Kai, all of that same material is an even set of 52 episodes. The entirety of Dragon Ball Kai currently is 99 episodes. It's also just recently made a comeback, and they're doing another 50 to 60 episodes or so to cover the last part of the story originally. But yeah, it is tremendously cut down from what it once was. Another thing that I feel is kind of worth explaining too. I mentioned this a little bit on the Bleach Curve blog previously. A lot of people also seem to give a lot of shit to Dragon Ball as a whole because of the whole deal of how long it drags out and how many hundreds of episodes and hours wasted, et cetera, et cetera. Let me explain something that maybe not all people fully grasp here. Is that so you have a really successful series in Shonen Jump Weekly Magazine. This is at the time that Dragon Ball was like coming out, so like the 90s basically, and 80 and like late 80s as well, whatever. You have a really successful manga series that the producers and editors are pressuring to continue going on far past where the creator multiple times was thinking, I can probably end it here, maybe I could end it here, and it keeps going and going and going. This guy has to produce 18 pages every single week without stopping, unless I'm sure they give him there are breaks once in a while, but still. Now I think unless you're Eiichiro Oda, you don't get breaks, but I digress. The point is, 18 pages absolutely every single week. Meanwhile, there's an animation studio having to produce 22 minutes of animation every single week in tandem with you, So, and like Goku and Frieza were fighting each other in the comic and on television at the same time. And the show was only just slightly behind where the comic was. In which case, it's like, okay, we can do one of a few different things that the animation staff is thinking to themselves. We can add in the scene where we cut back to Earth, and Chi-Chi and all the other friend characters are like, futzing around making a spaceship or something. We can waste a few minutes doing that. We can also waste a few minutes having the recap and the opening and the ending. We can stretch the material out so that we can cover 22 minutes and not get so close to where the comic is at the moment, so we don't catch up and run out of material to draw off of. And then, or we could write an entire filler arc and just have a month or two's worth of material to tie us over with so that we're not, catching up to where the comic is. To which you'd probably say, well, why don't they just take a break and let the comic keep going so then they can, have some time to catch up? It's like, Avatar: The Last Airbender would take a break, between every single season, and they still do that. It's like, okay, well, here's the difference. In Japan, a time slot is precious. You can't give that up under any circumstance. As soon as Dragon Ball Kai was done the first go-around for those 99 episodes I mentioned, immediately they swooped in. Toei Animation was like, okay, we got to put something else in here. Toriko, that'll be our next big hit. Toriko didn't turn out so well, so Dragon Ball Kai came back. On that note, to kind of get off of that and back onto the real topic at hand, Dragon Ball Kai did not do very well in Japan. The reason being, and I think that Chris Sabat, who those of you who don't know from watching all 700 Digino voice acting rants I go on, Chris Sabat is the director of DBZ. He has been for over a decade, and he's the voice of Vegeta, Piccolo, Yamcha, everybody. He put it as Dragon Ball Kai in Japan was like a version for their iPhone. Dragon Ball practically never went away in Japan. Like there was a break, and then they had a little comeback with when the new PS2 video games were coming out. But its presence was always kind of omnipresent. That was good, Chris. Good job. Anyway, so Dragon Ball Kai was kind of just its purpose for Japan was to get new, younger viewers who didn't grow up with the show into it. They had new music. They had a few new, more modernly popular Japanese voice actors, like playing some of the characters, and et cetera, and of course preserving most of the cast. But for them, it wasn't nearly as meaningful. For us, it was. For the United States, and actually internationally, maybe in some cases. I don't know what other countries might have needed it in the same way that we did, but you could argue that Dragon Ball Kai in the U.S. was for the same purpose, getting newer, younger audience kids, into the series, which I'm sure it did, because from what I understand, I think it did pretty well on Nickelodeon when it was on Nicktoons Network at the time, and obviously now it will be on Adult Swim, and it's going to be uncut. But what do I mean by that? Why did we need it? All right, now I'm going to get into the possibly controversial subject with a few listeners, because some of you I've had conversations in comments on other videos with about this. Okay. The version of Dragon Ball Z that we as Americans grew up with on Toonami and syndicated for a while on different channels and things, the version that we had is the beginning of the franchise's success in America, for sure. But objectively, it's not very good. That version of the show, that production at the time, is objectively not a good representation of the source material. It just is not. And I know, and listen, I grew up with it, just because I know already that I'm going to get comments of, it's better. I grew up with it just like everybody else did, okay? And, and I'm aware there are people who, to put it bluntly, hate the Japanese version. They don't like how Goku sounds because they kept Masako Nozawa as the voice from when he was 10 years old to when he was 40 years old. I know people don't like the music with the Shunsuke Kikuchi horn stuff. I get that. But that's the show that, and everywhere else in the world, it was a success well before it came to the U.S. In at least in multiple countries, maybe not the entire world, but either way, long before we ever got it, and we inserted our Mondo Cool next dimension nonsense or whatever, the show was a massive success everywhere else, right? So here's the thing too: the two biggest things about Dragon Ball Kai that make it deserve to be watched by both people who did grow up with it and people who didn't, are the writing, which is vastly superior to how it once was. There's no more stupid, inappropriate puns and jokes for 5-year-olds inserted in inappropriately. There's no covering up really of any quote unquote inappropriate things for American kids. And coupled with that, the voiceover is also vastly superior because, first of all, the actors who weren't that great were replaced by people who were significantly better and more experienced, and the actors who were brought back, which is, quite frankly, the grand majority of them, had a decade's worth of experience under their belt, compared to these Texas actors in Dallas at Funimation were starting out. Some of them weren't even actors at the time that Dragon Ball Z was being done there. And now all of them are significantly more experienced. They've done so much stuff and are all incredibly good. And again, going back to the writing, it's like people like J. Michael Tatum and Patrick Seitz who are also really proficient at writing adaptive scripts for anime. The dialogue just flows better. It's like, oh, they're talking like real human beings now and not, because you have to understand, too, the version that we got on Toonami or whatever back in the day was with the mentality of we have to water this down and make it as cool to a 10-year-old as possible, And I'm sure it succeeded. I mean, it did succeed in some aspects. But I feel like this interpretation of it, this more accurate interpretation of it deserves to be watched because you're getting a better sense of what it is really that made the show so successful in the first place. And I keep saying that, but what do I mean by that? There's so many subtle things about the story and characters of the Dragon Ball universe that Americans never understood, that Americans never really got. I think I said a little bit about this in my Villains Cur blog when I mentioned bits about Frieza. America did not get Frieza until Dragon Ball Kai. Okay, there's a distinct reason why people hated Frieza and they liked Cell and Boo more in the U.S. because Frieza's writing and performance were both awful. Okay, that is with no offense to Linda Young and whoever the adaptive script writers were at the time, but just that's not the character. Christopher Ayres performing Frieza with dialogue written by J. Michael Tatum is Frieza. That's a much closer representation of what that character is supposed to be about than we've ever had previously, except for maybe the video games, because the video games are translated a little closer to the real scripts, in general, but either way. And Frieza's one major example, but there's so many things about the story of Dragon Ball that I didn't get until I saw Kai. There were just little subtle things with the characters that I'm just like, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's why they were doing this or whatever. And we just didn't get that because that's not the representation that we got at the time. And I know it's been very dire, this Curb Log. I'm gonna kind of close things up because I'm saying just about everything I need to say, but I'm gonna close this up with kind of a good story. So I had a girlfriend a few years ago who did not like Dragon Ball growing up at all. They were a big anime fan, but they did not like Dragon Ball. So they had come to visit, and I had just gotten my copy of Dragon Ball Kai Volume 1, which was like the first 13 episodes or so. And we watched it, and she liked it. And then another, maybe half a year passed, and I had gone to go visit her, and I had Part 2 and Part 3 on DVD, which was everything from Vegeta being defeated all the way up until I think the Frieza fight was just beginning. So she went in with an open mind, and before I knew it, she was the one, a person who previously thought the show was completely stupid. She was the one going, next one, next one, next one, next one, next one, next one, next one. I want to see what happens next. I want to see what happens next. And so we binge watched 26 episodes in the span of a week because we were just so into it, and she loved it. And she's one example. Dragon Ball Kai is the perfect way to get any of your friends who previously were like, oh, I didn't really like it, or oh, I didn't really watch it. It's the perfect way to get them into it. And not only that, but to get them to really genuinely like it and appreciate it. And you can find a lot of new appreciation for it that you might not have had before or previously, So what am I saying with this? If you fall under that category, then do me a favor. If you listen to these and you like these videos that I do, etc., do me a personal favor. Because I'll also say too, if you're a fan of the stuff that I do, whether it's Tome or my older Newground stuff or Digino voice acting or whatever, or even these Curb Logs, Dragon Ball, everything, not just Z, everything is a massive, massive inspiration to me. And, it's not a guilty pleasure. I could tell you why it is that and maybe that'll have to be another topic in and of itself at some point. Maybe I'll do that with Kaiser Neko or something. I could tell you why I love that show and why it is so great and why people do love it so much. But again, that's another subject. The point is, it's not a guilty pleasure, and it shouldn't be a guilty pleasure for anybody. And I want more people to like the show and genuinely enjoy it in the way that I think it was meant to be seen. And the fact that also it is back on Toonami, this new version of Toonami that Adult Swim has kind of created, is pretty amazing in full circle. And the fact that it can be seen in this form, I think is really, really good. So take this opportunity, give it a shot, and stick with it. Because also, I'm going to say one thing up front, because people are claiming, oh, it's censored. It's not. There's literally one bit of censorship they made. It was on Raditz and Goku's, the hole in their stomach when they get the Makanko Sapo shot through them. That's literally it. Okay, because people are like, oh, they 4 kids did. No, that's not the case. That's literally the only bit of censorship that was on it. Everything else is fine. Okay, so I guarantee you, it is objectively a better performed, better written, better representation of the story that Akira Toriyama wrote in the late 80s and carried throughout most of the 90s that is such a worldwide success. Trust me on this. Give it a shot. I guarantee that you will get something out of it that you didn't have before. So, if you were turned off to it, if you never gave it a shot in any of those definitions I've given, try it. That's it. I don't have anything else to say, but I guess leave your thoughts, particularly after you watch it tonight. This is going to go up 12 hours before it airs on Adult Swim, I believe. So if you watch it tonight, leave a comment and tell me what you thought, and if your interest is intrigued, and if it's not, give it a little bit, stick with it. Just give it a fair shot, I would say. That's it. I'm going to go. Next Curb Log on Tuesday is going to be replaced with the Tome Q&A for the 3rd anniversary. So look forward to that if you're a Tome fan, and then I'll have some more cool stuff in the usual Curb Log time slots for the rest of November. So get excited for that. Thanks. I hope you'll watch and enjoy tonight, and thanks very much.